So Bob emails, what do you say?
Yeah.
Annual anonymous patron. She says, "Hi, Kirk and Bob. In a couple of recent episodes, Bob mentioned that he loves his clients. My question is, do you ever tell them that you love them, Bob? If so, what do you take into consideration when deciding whether to do so or not?" Just chiming in, Bob, do you?
Yeah, sometimes. I do tell my clients that I love them sometimes. Less than I used to, because these days it's couple therapy mostly, and it just doesn't, it doesn't come up as much because we're not paying attention so much to the relationship we're having, mostly to the relationship that the couples, they're having. So, but occasionally it'll come up. Like most recently, there's a couple I see who are not sure if they're going to stay together and are just doing the most admirable job of talking to one another about their basic difference. And they're individually, they're both lovely. And as a couple, they're really lovely. I don't know if they're going to make it as a couple. They really could break up because the thing that they seem to have a difference about is pretty basic deal breaker. So they might, but it won't be one of those, breakups with a lot of animosity or, it's sort of like, this is as far as we can go together thing. And so when they were facing that, I said to them, you guys are just, I love you both. I don't really care if you make it or not. I'm rooting for you, but if you don't, you don't. And I really appreciate how, upfront you're being with one another, how plain and candid and decent, because nobody was judging anybody for having the position they were having. They were just working out whether or not they can make a go of it.
Do you think they received it as love, or I love you guys in a casual way?
More like the second one.
Yeah. Have you ever said, I love you
Yeah.
to a client?
Many times.
Like what do you take into consideration when deciding to do that?
Yeah. That's a good question. Well, Freud said love is the cure. Though when Freud said that, Freud was talking about how clients loving their therapist is the cure and not the other way around. And then I heard Marcia Linehan talk about that once, and she said love is the cure, but she was talking about how it's really important that therapists love their client. And I take that quite literally. I get to know a lot of my people pretty well, very intimately. I presume they tell me things that they don't tell too many other people, and take a risk with me. And I am a pretty warm human. And there have been times when it seemed important to let a client know that I love them, that I believe in them, that I think they're a good person. And I think of it in terms of like, parental love, even though I don't feel parental towards many of my people. Some of them are older than me, but I feel a kind of nurturing love. And when it's occurred to me that a client would benefit from that kind of forthright expression, then I'll say it. But to be honest with you, I think nowadays, if I'm doing personal counseling with somebody, I'm less apt to do it. I'm still apt to act in warm ways, but I probably wouldn't say that as nearly as much as I would have, say, 5 or 6 years ago.
Why?
I don't know. I just feel like I want to be careful about, let's see. I want to be mindful of transference and countertransference and have access to an awareness of that more so than I used to. And I want to be mindful of the feeling I'm having towards the client as what do you call it? Like a way to learn about what's happening in the dynamic. So it seems as though for me, if I tell a client that I love them in the way that I'm remembering having done it in the past, I may be losing sight of them, and I don't want to lose sight of them. So,
so you're worried about something?
Yeah, I'm mostly worried about having an inaccurate, I want to say distortion, but I don't love putting it that way and this sounds like worse than I feel about it. I don't even like talking about this because I can't be that articulate about it, at least not now. But I guess I feel like if I let the cat out of the bag, then I can't pay attention to the cat no more. It's a terrible metaphor.
If you felt love
Yeah.
for a client
Yeah.
and you are having an impulse to say, I love you
Yeah.
in that nurturing way,
Yeah.
you're worried what is going to happen?
That I will not be stepping back enough within myself to think about what's the dynamic happening here.
What would actually, if I were to see it in the room happening, that would be bad? What would I see?
Oh, nothing bad. I don't think anything bad would happen, but I wonder if it would be inefficient.
What would be inefficient?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to be articulate about this because, it sounds paranoid, and I don't feel paranoid. I just feel like I want to be mindful.
It doesn't, I mean, I don't hear paranoia. I don't hear anything because I have no idea what you're saying.
Well, then this is going well.
So if it feels as though maybe the listeners are getting something, but I actually have zero, because you're talking about inefficiencies and once a cat gets out of the bag, which I think of as, but I don't think this is it, of you're worried that you're going to fall in love with your clients.
No, I don't worry about that.
Which I don't think that.
No, I don't
So
worry
what
about that.
cat is getting out of what bag?
I read this book recently. The book was about mostly about transference and countertransference. And what I noticed in the excerpts that the therapist wrote about is they kept pressing. They didn't press the client. That's wrong. They kept very consistently confronting or mirroring their client, like giving them mirroring interpretations of their behavior. Mostly it was in the direction, it seemed to me, of self-activation, like being more assertive and being, acting from my autonomy and my agency.
Trying to help a client be more assertive? Yeah. So the therapist was reacting from their countertransference and the effort of helping the client be more assertive.
They were paying attention to their experience, and they were constantly coming back to the client with, reminders. It's okay for you to speak up for yourself, right? It's okay for you to, this looks like that thing that happens to you where you find yourself, caving in, or they didn't put
those
it
interventions were spurred by their countertransference of, for example, being upset at a client for not being assertive or something like that.
Or thinking that the client was becoming dependent on the therapist and it was interfering with them. This is what I really mean to say. It was interfering with recognizing that they're capable and can act
independent of the therapist. So to say "I love you" would interfere with that?
It could.
How?
Let's see how. Well, apparently I don't know.
But you have a vague sense that it might.
Yeah.
Or you've thought it might in the past.
Yeah,
Have you had that happen in the past?
Have
you had that happen in the past when you told a client you loved them from the heart, from a nurturing sense, and they became too dependent?
No. I didn't have that. No, and I'm not thinking that the client is going to become too dependent. In fact, I think becoming dependent on a therapist is just part of the course of things for most of us.
Right.
So no big deal there. I guess I'm just more like thinking about treatment focus. And my treatment focus these days is on getting my client, like I'm thinking about someone that I've been seeing for years now, maybe 10 years. And my focus is getting him moving because he knows what's wrong, but he can't seem to activate to do something about his situation. And so here's the thing is I'm not really thinking about his relationship with me, except insofar as how is this like his relationship with his spouse or other, or his parents or whatever. And how can I use what's happening between us to learn about him and to push him? And it's not that I don't love the guy. I love that guy. He's fantastic. And I really believe in him, and there's lots of him he's a really lovely person. But I don't think that paying attention to that is what we need to do. We need to be paying attention to what's happening in the session, in the ways in which if he falls into passivity, he's falling into passivity with me. And I am pushing that angle more these days than I have in the past, because I think actually it's going to get him moving.
And if you were to say you loved him, then what?
I think it would just distract us.
distract.
I don't think it's going to be anything bad's not going to happen.
Okay.
You know, and I have told that guy I love him. I do love him.
Oh.
I don't think anything bad's going to happen, but I sort of feel like it's going to distract him from, you know, like really the truth is he needs to be asserting with me. Like he needs to be, and I don't know really what that means yet.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping to learn more about what that means.
So does the question, by the way, I don't have any skin in the game as to whether you tell your clients you love them or not. And I don't even remember if you had asked me before I read this email, how often you or I comparatively say that we love our clients. I don't know if I would have known. I think I might have forgotten us having this conversation, but I think I would have intuited or had some distant memory that you probably did say that you loved your clients occasionally. But I'm only asking you these questions because I'm guessing the listeners, as annual anonymous patron, is interested in this question, and probably a lot of clinicians out there, about because they respect you and your approach. And when you said that you in the past would say that you would love your clients, and you still have that, you're open to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you would, from what you were saying earlier, you would say that from a nurturing standpoint, and it would, and I know enough about you, and you kind of portrayed it this way, that it would be spontaneous. It wouldn't be something that you would plan. It would happen, you know, organically. And you're, you know, and it's not just, I love you. It's in the midst of a larger intervention or vibe or openness that you're having with a client, where you are intensely talking to them and saying, I appreciate you, and I see you, and I care about you, and I know you, and I think about you, and I love you, and I you know, our relationship is deep, and I feel it too, kind of a thing.
Yeah, that.
And you would say, I love you in the midst of all that. And then you said that, well, so let's just start there before getting back to the cat and the bag. But when in the past you would do that, anonymous annual patron is asking, what did you take into consideration before doing that in the past?
What did I take into consideration? I think mostly what I'm thinking about is how can our relationship, its strength, lend itself to my client in doing tough stuff that they're facing to doing, like, for instance, trauma work, right? I'm thinking of somebody that I love very deeply, just lovely human, who was doing some really fucking intense exposure therapy and was reliving some heinous fucking shit. And I remember I spent hours with her in all that, and I have a very deep respect for her, but also I feel like one of what she needs is that somebody really fucking believes in her, right? And I really do believe in her. I think she was, I think about her. I haven't seen her in years and years, and I still think about her. I'll never forget her, I don't think. And I think that telling her that I love her helps. Let's see, I think it helped fill a void, because there wasn't a whole lot of other support. And also because she had been exploited by people in positions of power, and there was no fucking way. Well, first off, I would never do that because that's just heinous, but it seemed very important to hold her in respect and regard and in protection. And there's something really important about saying to her, I love you and I will not fuck with you. Like, I'm not going to hurt you. Whereas other people who are in positions of power over her would use something like that to get something from her, to extract something. And I wasn't going to take nothing from her because she needed somebody the way we all do, someone who's trustworthy, who was going to be protective of her and not rip her off. And she'd been pretty well ripped off in many ways over the years before I met her. So I think and I hope, though, that she benefited from us having a deep connection like that, where we could say that to one another without there being any kind of exploitation.
Yeah.
I think that's true, and I hope that's true.
I'm quite positive.
Yeah.
So when you progressed in the last 5 years or more recently, so what has changed? And I don't know if you have thought about it enough to be able to answer this question.
I'll take a run at it.
But I'll ask it one more time.
Sure. I'll take a run at it. I think now what I'm doing is I'm thinking dynamically about what's happening. Like I'm thinking about this fellow that I mentioned a minute or two ago. And I'm thinking about what's he doing in our meeting right now? What's he doing?
Yeah. But what if you had the client that you were talking about? What if you had another client like that?
Like the one I mentioned from before?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a little hard to imagine because I don't do that kind of work anymore. But if I did, yeah, I probably would.
Right. So nothing's changed. You just don't have the same clients.
That's true. I do not have the same clients. But if I were to see that client again, or someone who had those kind of issues, I would be adding in my conceptualization a lot more about what's happening right now between us.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
So, and I probably can't talk about this very well, but I think about that object relation stuff around splitting, wherein a person, it's hard to see. Splitting, as I understand it, means you can't see the other person as both good and bad, to use those words, but as they either are one or the other. And my concern about being the good object is, can I also be the bad one, and can I help it? I would want a person to see both the good and bad in me, like as part of their healing. Like I'm not.
Are you being influenced by the old school and viable, but debatable practice of more of a blank screen psychoanalytic perspective?
Yeah, somewhat, but I don't think I'll ever be that blank.
No, but you're heading in that direction.
Yeah.
Given the perspective. I mean, in those psychodynamic object relations books, some of which I've loaned to you, which I had forgotten, that is it being explicitly prescribed, or is it just an outgrowth of the model?
Yeah, nobody says blank screen. At least the book I read most recently didn't say anything about blank screen, but it was very clear to me that guy had his eye on the prize. He was, I think, probably a very solid therapist, and he was pretty glued to thinking about what's this client doing right now, and
not personally embodying a humanistic love or positive regard.
Yeah, no.
More
I don't
analytical, more observational.
Yeah. And when you put it like that, it's like, I don't want to be that.
But you're saying, and you said that you're just going kind of in that direction, which the question as to whether or not you would say you love someone, it sounds like you have a sense now, given the influences that you're swimming in right now, that you might not even go there in your heart as much because you have these other attentions, the observational, analytical, interpretation, conceptual side, instead of living in the moment and being personally swimming around in their waters, the way that you were before, which was, I don't know how you describe it. Would you say it's humanistic, or would you say it's more casual or less interpretive?
Less interpretive and humanistic. Yeah, I would say that.
So more humanistic, less interpretive. Yeah. Okay. And that's just the kind of sine wave that you're at right now.
Yeah, that is true.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Going on with your email. My therapist of 4 years has said she loves me a handful of times during the last couple of years. She is very boundaried. You even commented on this in a previous email I sent in. Oh, so you must have read one of her emails and said, wow, your therapist has great boundaries. These occasions when she has said that she loves me have been very meaningful for me, and the sense of deep connection and acceptance is incredible. It isn't said often. I don't rely on it or crave it, and it's only been said in response to me saying something like, I feel loved by you right now, or saying that I love her. It's never planned. It's just something I felt strongly in the moment and then said because it felt right. Early on, I had a lot of trouble believing my therapist really cares and doesn't want to harm me. So to really feel loved is a big deal and feels very hard earned. Any thoughts on that, Bob?
That all sounds lovely, and my hat's off to you. That's a lot of growth. Good on you.
Yeah, it's interesting. She is describing provoking that, or at least popping the cork, if you will.
Yeah.
Of I love you, or I feel really loved right now. And then the therapist genuinely follows suit and says, I do love you right now, or something like that. Or I love you too. So that's another angle to this, that clients can take that leap. You know, who knows what a therapist is going to say, but that might be something to do. Or at the very least, you can raise the question. If you want this sort of interaction or you're curious, you can ask your therapist, as Bob always says. All right, let's take a break. We get back. Let's read more emails, as I always say. All right, we're back from the break. Anonymous listener, she says, I've been in therapy for a while and have essentially been lying about something. I decided to send this email to my therapist, and now I'm horrified that they're going to fire me. I realize I clearly have issues, but I don't know why I do this. How would you and Bob react to this email? So just chiming in, That's quite an intro.
That is. Are they going to, did they print the email?
They did.
Oh.
So I forgot what is in this email, this email within an email. But here we go. This is anonymous listener, her emailing into her therapist. We need to address the elephant in the screen. That's funny, is it?
It's very good.
It's like online theory.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to say it out loud. I need you to call me out on my shit, or whatever the therapeutic way of doing that is. Mm-hmm. I thought you would eventually, but you didn't, and it's making me lose respect for you, as I'm getting concerned you actually believe in that stuff. That stuff isn't real. The personas, in quotes, is all fake. So just chiming in, I'm losing the thread a little bit. I'm guessing her and our therapist know what she's referring to.
Yeah.
She's saying, I need you to call me out my shit, and I'm beginning to lose respect for you, as I'm getting concerned you actually believe in that stuff. Meaning the stuff that the client is saying, that stuff isn't real. The personas is all fake. So I don't know. It kind of sounds like the client is saying things about personas, and the client is at least halfway hoping that the therapist will say, the personas thing, or there's a problem with that personas thing that you keep talking about. And the therapist isn't pushing back, and she is saying, I want you to push back. Going on. It started as a way to defer the topic because I hate being vulnerable and I like playing games with people and pissing them off. So just chiming in on that one. So it does sound like the client is saying, I have bullshit ways, and she didn't use that word, but I have bullshit ways of distracting and diverting away from things that I'm not comfortable talking about. And you are giving into this. You're letting me push you around in therapy. So going on, it started as a way to defer the topic because I hate being vulnerable and I like playing games with people and then pissing them off. I do want to be vulnerable though, but I don't know how to stop. It is a defense mechanism. It's nothing personal. I don't think you're stupid. I think everyone is stupid. Truthfully, it's becoming harder to keep a straight face, and I'm starting to feel bad. I truly want to stop doing stuff like this. I want to work on it. I just don't know how. Thanks. End of email. And then end of email. Bob, what would you say or do the next time you talk to a client if they sent an email in like this?
Well, my hit is that what they're saying is they behave in haughty, superior ways, and they want the therapist to confront their behavior because it's just a smokescreen.
I see.
I think that's what they're saying. Like that's the persona they're alluding to.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe that's not true, but that's how it landed for me.
Yeah. Well, there's something that the client is doing on purpose to avoid getting into their vulnerability, and a big part of them as a client wants to be vulnerable, but in a pinch resorts to this and just does it automatically, and is just almost the client seems to be saying, it's getting ridiculous how obvious I am with this defense mechanism. I don't understand why you aren't confronting me on this. It's interesting. So yeah, what would you do?
Let's see. Okay, so if this happened, I'm thinking, what would I do if the client hadn't confessed that this was a smokescreen? Would I say something like, if you think I'm dumb, why do you continue to see me? Right? Like, how is this good for you? Right? If you think I'm stupid or inept or whatever, right? If you think I'm a bad therapist or whatever. So I might ask that. I think nowadays I probably would ask that. But if I had a client that sent me this email, what would I do? I'd probably say, hell of an email. Looks like you really want something here. And you're noticing that you do something that stops it from happening. And you're probably going to keep doing that. What would you like us to do? Do you want us to highlight it when it happens?
Yeah.
Should we crack a joke about it? Should we go along with it sometimes? What do you want us to do? Or maybe would you like me to just say to you, you're doing the thing? Right. Oh, must be something vulnerable here you're avoiding. Would you like me to do that? I could do that.
Right. Ongoing session to session in the future, that would be important to say occasionally.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that for yourself?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to call yourself out? Oh, I'm doing that thing again. Now, me personally, I do that. I get
as a client.
Yeah, I get haughty towards my therapist. And the first time I told him, I was horrified that it is the case. Though it's not the same as me, as I don't think I'm doing a smokescreen. I think I actually feel superior to him, and it is embarrassing to say that, but I actually do. Not because I am. I'm convinced it's just this is what I do to stay It's a defense against vulnerability, which is to put some distance between me and him. And I've done it with other people along the way. I'm thinking about somebody that I used to date a long time ago, first person I ever loved, I think. And I had a similar kind of strategy in my head. I never said anything out loud. That was a way to keep distant from, connecting. So, and it, given me, it makes sense. But I just think it's an aspect of my narcissism. Yeah. So, we talked about it about 2 weeks ago, and he doesn't really react to it. He just yeah, I know you do that, Bob. And on we go.
Yeah. Right. I'm glad you introduced the topic of narcissism, because the emailer fits the profile to a T, a particular type of narcissistic individual. And I'm using the narcissistic term regarding narcissistic personality disorder. Yeah. I'm not diagnosing the anonymous listener, but that's the spectrum that I'm talking about, because there's various different types of narcissism or usages clinically. But
there's also some vernacular, regular people speak that they use that word to, as a bludgeon. You're talking about it just in terms of a clinical profile.
Yeah. Well, there's other clinical usages like we're all narcissistic, or we all as a child go through a narcissistic phase, or we're all self-interested or whatever. But the markers are here that there's a few indicators that, like she's saying, it's nothing personal. This is the email to the therapist. It's nothing personal. I don't think you're stupid. I think everyone is stupid. Yeah. So she is saying she thinks her therapist is stupid because she thinks everyone is stupid. And by definition, she's not stupid, right? So, it's all just part of the gig, and that's why you're in therapy, anonymous listener. And sounds like you know that. And it's very common for narcissistic people to, in fact, it's right down the middle, the experience that I have in specializing with people with narcissistic personality disorder of various profiles and various different degrees, that I will feel like I am being talked down to and I am being played with. Not in a psychopathic way, but in a way of talking to someone who is coming to therapy, but is giving me every indication that they don't need therapy, that they think I'm not particularly smart or useful, and that they have it all figured out. And the persona that they have is, at least hopefully by me, detectable fairly easily, because it'll feel very different from every other client that I work with. Because it's totally devoid of any kind of vulnerability. They tend to come in and just kind of shoot the shit. They want to report to me the way that I think about people with narcissistic personality disorder, and I love these people. They're just as frustrating as any other personality disorder person. So I'm not saying that it's not a struggle, but I love working with them, and I when I'm at my best, I understand and deeply care, and I in a pinch will assume that there's this little boy or girl inside of all of them that is just desperately wanting to be seen and heard, but they get in their way constantly to be seen and heard, but I will, do my best to see through that. And it's possible, anonymous listener, that your therapist absolutely knows all this shit.
I had that thought.
Yeah, and doesn't want to go too fast with you, because the corrective experience can be facilitated without a direct conversation about your defenses. With narcissistic people, not all of them, I will listen and allow them to get away with their defenses. Meanwhile, I'm hearing them and I'm eye contacting with them, and I'm trying to love their inner child, and I'm maybe highlighting aspects of their vulnerability and their humanity, and attuning in that way. And it's possible that who knows? It's possible your therapist is doing that. And as you get more vulnerable, as facilitated by both of you in therapy, you as a client are starting to freak out, and this email is a part of that. Or you want to take it to another level, and it literally is how this email is being portrayed. Or your therapist is not aware of what's happening and is having a confusing experience of, I feel like I'm not really effective, because it would be very common if you're treating someone with narcissism. And I don't know if you have narcissism, whatever it is that's going on with you, whether we call it narcissism or heavily defended vulnerability, it would be very likely that your therapist feels ineffective. And every therapist has, different ways of coping with that. Given that you've been working with your therapist for a while, I'm guessing that he is the sort that, do we have the gender of the therapist? I
think it's a he.
I decided as I'm a therapist, and now I'm coordinated. They are going to fire me. I realize I have issues. So the therapist, it's possible that the therapist feels ineffective, but is so mellow or has good enough training or supervision or something that is just okay with that feeling and doesn't freak out about it. It's also possible the therapist feels very effective because of the persona that you're putting forward. I don't know. But I'll tell you that if I received an email like this, I would be absolutely invigorated.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
Well, yeah, that, and wow, what a leap forward. What a massive vulnerability. And I would invite the sparring because that is a phase of therapy with narcissistic people, of sparring, of getting into the dirt. Similar to people with borderline, you got to get your hands dirty. You can't at least in my opinion, effectively, at least at a viable pace, other than like 5,000 years, actually help someone with borderline without getting close and allowing yourself to be at risk as a therapist of getting scathed within reason to your capability, given your own therapy and your own support and stuff. And the client needs to feel that contact. You can't just be a presence and expect the client to have enough of a deep corrective experience over time. So it has to be real. And with narcissism, it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing because underneath every narcissistic person is a borderline person in essence. And the feeling, though, is different. Although it can feel quite similar, it can feel quite threatening, but it'll have a different tinge. It'll have a tinge of you as a therapist are irrelevant. To the borderline countertransference experience, it'll feel like you're very relevant, like overly relevant, and you're a horrible person because you're so neglectful and you're so abandoning and so inconsiderate. With the narcissistic person, you won't feel that way. You'll just feel like you're like the stupidest, dumbass, smallest person on the planet. Why are you a therapist? Or why are you even a human being? You should just stare at Netflix and like go on Twitter all day like every other idiot on the world, you know? And so you just sit there and struggle with that feeling because every sentence is dealt with in that way by the client. They just, going down that road of them trying desperate, because they're in therapy, and if it's known by everyone that they are working on this, they're there, and the way that they struggle with it, and as they get closer, they will engage more and more rigidly to the narcissism, and they'll get hostile. And that will engage a very robust, well-practiced superiority sparring that they're very good at and a lot fucking better than you are as a therapist. In the same way that the borderline person knows exactly how to make you feel like you're an inconsiderate person, and they know how to make you feel like you aren't worthwhile, that you're actually evil in some ways. They're very good at getting under your skin in that way and making you feel really bad about yourself in a different way. And so with an email like this, I would say, okay, here we go.
Yep.
I can't believe, because I've never received an email, or I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure, I know I've had conversations that aren't this overt, but they're in this category. Like a client will come in and will basically say something like this. It'll start differently though. It'll start like, I feel like therapy we've been in therapy for 6 months. I feel like they'll have some sort of crisis and they'll say like, I feel like therapy isn't really useful or helpful or something. Or I feel like, well, no. What they'll say to me directly is they'll say, I feel like your approach isn't helping. And I'm wondering if a different therapist would help or something like that. Or they'll give that impression. And that's fine if that's literally what they're asking, and we can explore that. But if I determine that this is a transference of some kind and it's a defense, then it'll be that beginning of the conversation, and then we'll enter into alluding to a lot of the things here. And if I have seen the client effectively conceptualized, I will try to explain it to them. And that's one of the things I do with narcissistic people, because they can be so intellectual and think of themselves as so smart. I will just lean into that and say, well, you're smart. I'll just tell you what's in my head. Here's what I see. And at the same time, I'm acknowledging and seeing their vulnerability, which will in part be very well received by them in their heart, but not externally. So it'll hook them on some level in a good way. But that doesn't always work. But I find it usually does, because if we have a good enough relationship by that point. It doesn't end the narcissism, but it does set up the next phase of therapy. So anyway, if I had an email like this, I would absolutely I would celebrate it. And if especially a written down email like this, I might even print it out and frame it just to remind me of what is going on with a lot of other clients who, whether or not it's narcissism or avoidant attachment style or the kind of typical defenses maybe that a teenager might have, just this, because it so well embodies how busted up this person is about their vulnerability. It's clear that they are vulnerable and they want to be seen and they want to be taken care of. And they know that they have this thing that they do, and yet they keep doing it.
Well, the projected fantasy is I'll be rejected. When I send this to you, you're going to read it and you're going to kick me out. That's the projection. That's why they do their defense, is to avoid getting the rejection. But they are not imagining a universe in which they're held with care and love and regard, right. Even though, or even when, they have this, multifaceted thing. On the one hand, superior and haughty, and on the other hand, inferior and terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well said.
This is great.
Yeah. And in that mix is just filled with messages of you're a dumbass.
Yeah.
And I'm superior to you. Of, hey, I need you to call me out my shit, or whatever the therapeutic way of doing that is. I thought you would eventually, but you didn't, and it's making me lose respect for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I've lost respect for you because you've given in to what I have done to you.
Yeah.
And that's the ambivalence. That is that tension, the desperation to be seen and heard, while sabotaging themselves being seen and heard, but a hell of a lot more self-awareness and health by the client here to meta that, look down on that and say, well, that's not ultimately good for me. But she can't get out of the narcissism yet, obviously. Why would she? And she's still in that mindset of, you are dumb, and I've lost respect for you, or I never had respect for you, or something. And I don't think you're stupid. I just think everyone is stupid.
So you're stupid.
And then she says, truthfully, it's becoming harder to keep a straight face, and I'm starting to feel bad. I don't know what that second part means, but it's becoming harder to keep a straight face in therapy because I'm so easily manipulating you with my personas, with this fake presentation or whatever it is. And it's just laughable how bad you are at this. Like, you're not confronting me. So it's so busted up because, one could say, a friend, for example, well, if you want to be seen, then stop doing all that shit. You're the one that's pushing him away, the therapist away. So just stop. Why don't you just stop? I mean, maybe the therapist is bad at their job, but maybe they're at least average or above average, and you're just so good at tricking people, or the therapist knows you're tricking them and they are uncomfortable about confronting you about it because they don't know how you would react. You're the one causing this. If you want vulnerability to be seen, then just stop doing this stuff, and then no one will have to do anything. Your therapist won't have to overcome it, and you'll be seen. So stop. But this is the conundrum, and it's all in there, It's all in this email. So that's my response to that.
Good luck.
Yeah, but what a great, and really everyone out there, you can think for yourself. It's unlikely that you have this exact issue, but you have some issue if you're in therapy that you think about, and maybe even more broadly, just any close relationship that you have, friend, spouse, coworker, that there's some kind of plug in the system, in the pipe. There's a clog, and there enough water is getting through that it works, but you've been avoiding looking at that. You have that sink in your house that just isn't running quite well.
Oh, my tub, yeah.
And you just don't want to, you've used the Drano and it will temporarily help a little bit, but you don't want to get the snake out.
You got to get the snake out.
And you don't want to have to pull out that just glob of hair and God knows what else is in there. And it's just, when I see that, it literally makes me want to gag thinking about it. So, you don't want to, but when you do, your pipes just, drain like, I don't know, what's something that drains really well?
My pipes.
Like a young man's bladder.
Oh, yeah.
Let's take a break. When we get back, another email. What do you say?
Right on.
All right. We are back from the break after said drainage occurred in the bathroom. Middle tier patron Jules from Alberta. She says, I am experiencing something in therapy, and I haven't been able to find any information about it online. And it causes me to feel very peculiar and othered, a feeling that I am always working through after growing up in a cult. I've grown to value your podcasts, and I especially enjoy Bobisodes.
Oh, thank you.
Did you know that we call them Bobisodes sometimes?
I thought they were Bobcasts.
Bobcasts? Yeah, I kind of like that too.
You do you.
Yeah, you do whatever. I resonate a lot with his way of being in the world. I am experiencing transference with my therapist. The best way I can express it is that I see my counselor as the God that I wished I had. I've been in counseling for 2 years now, working on religious trauma, cult trauma, and childhood sexual abuse. There are gaps in my development, things I probably shouldn't have learned years ago, and my therapist hasn't once made me feel uncomfortable or feel foolish for it. He simply hears me, sees me, and gives me a safe place to figure it out. I do a lot of reading online, especially as I try to figure out what parts of my thinking are cult taught and what parts are not. And I have never seen anything or anyone talk about deity or religious transference. Have you ever run into this, or do you have any insight you can share? End of email. Middle tier patron Jules from Alberta asked that question. So, in typical Bobcast form, Bob, what do you think?
Well, I imagine it happens because, like when people come out of cults, they usually, I don't know a whole lot about this, but the little bit I know is they come from a community where one of the leader, whoever it is revered as if they're God. And of course, that person generally pushes that narrative, right? Or some version of it, but some version of being all powerful, all knowing, or all something, or certainly knowing more than you. And so you come out of that and you grew up in it. And so you grew up in a I'm thinking about Catholics. Like this has got to be pretty common, anyways, so you go into therapy with somebody who's, I guess sort of an authority or sort of a parent or whatever, and you're going to have that kind of transference, and you're going to see them as if they are, all powerful or whatever, right? That just seems like that just follows. It's just logical. And the thing to do, I think, I don't know, you tell me, but is to talk about it like I'm starting to see you as all powerful now. Right? And I'm turning you into somebody who's better than me or bigger than me or smarter than me or whatever more than me, right? Is that I'm just spitballing here, but is that a disowning of your own intelligence or your own capacity for wisdom or knowledge or whatever? Power, is that a way to survive, when you're in a relationship, with whoever the cult leader is and they're telling you that they're all powerful, which is going to squelch your individuality and rip you off. And so here you are as an adult and you're trying to, get past all that shit. And maybe your body just does what it always does, which is hand the power over to the other. And maybe it's really scary. Maybe it's threatening to keep it for yourself or to recognize your own power or believe in it or whatever. I don't know if any of that's true. It just seems like what comes to mind off the top of my head, and I'm supposed to talk.
You are supposed to talk.
I know.
The episodes are named after you. It'd be funny if in the Bobcasts, there was no Bob casting. It would be false advertisements.
You get sued.
Yeah. So, that's one possibility. And the way that I see it is similar to the first way that you were saying, or that would be my first hypothesis. And I'll elaborate on it a little bit in that I don't know what sort of cult you're in, but there are different flavors of this. But I wouldn't be surprised if from day zero you were in a group that had a lot of good and bad and neutral things about it. Sounds like some very, very bad things, but also maybe some neutral things or things that have nuance, like the idea of a charismatic leader being in connection with God. That can be totally fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that harm is happening if you live in a culture or a group that has that element in it. So I'll just speak from that, because it isn't necessarily, depending, Jules, I don't know for you, but it isn't necessarily something that needs to be discarded in order for you to live a happy, healthy life. And for some people, they might benefit from even seeking out groups like this, religions. So the way that I was wondering about this for you, Jules, and I don't know, is that, again, from day zero, there's a charismatic leader, and that person is constantly in your life in a way that cannot really be comprehended by people who are not in a high control group. And that person might be talking, or the group might be talking about God very frequently, again, in a way that other people, even highly religious people, could never comprehend. There are cults that are very common in which the charismatic leader and God are two people or two presences in your life, or they're the same or something, but they're basically constantly in your life. The parents are constantly referring to that person. That person, the charismatic leader, and the God figure could, or at least the person in a concrete way, could literally be in your life all the time. Some kids have to spend all their time with that guy instead of their own father, so it's possible that it was just all encompassing, and there were positive things about it. The feeling of safety in a way, right? A safety with a asterisk, conditional safety if you uphold the cult line. But if you're born into a cult, there's a lot of functionality and normal kinds of attachments. It's laced with all this horribleness, but it's still love and affection and fun and play and mentoring and all that stuff. It's not like destructive cults don't have that. In fact, a lot of times they have it in spades. They have it so much, and that's what the love bombing aspect of it can be. And that's what it can be attractive, And I don't know your cult, but you have a very interesting and maybe an experience that at least contemporary North Americans haven't had. I'm guessing in other countries it's a lot more common to have this kind of transference because, in a mainstream, even religious household in North America, the way that people typically experience transference is more felt as if it's a parent, right? Parental. But for many people, again, cults and around the world, parent and God and that presence is so much more involved. For a lot of mainstream Americans and Canadians, I would imagine, because I'm just thinking about my own childhood. Yeah, God can be a big part. Jesus can be a big part of your life, depending on what religion it is. But I wasn't constantly being reminded that he was right there with me and right there in my head, depending, you know what I mean? So it's quite possible that you felt God in a very concrete way, not like in a scientific way, but it felt you're age 5 and God is like right there, embodied in the charismatic leader or in this idol or the way that everyone's talking. So all that is infused for you, the God, parent, authority, person that you're trying to appeal to, person that you get resources from, person that everyone looks up to, person that loves you, person that is the all-encompassing light God, the person, the sun that warms the earth is the God and the charismatic leader, or even just God, And so for you, as Bob was saying, get close to your therapist, you start to have that transference, which is a sign of good progression of the deepening of a relationship so it can become actually corrective for you. And you start to see your therapist in the way that you saw as a child the giver, the mother, the father, the savior, the nurturer, the giver of life, the giver of food, the giver of safety, the all powerful. It's right there, and he knows me. My therapist knows me. I'm feeling it. And yeah, going online, I'm guessing you're not going to find people talking about it. Have I ever run into it before? Yes, not this specific manifestation of the way that you're talking about it, but things very, very similar to this. Yeah. So it's different because your therapist might not have but I'm guessing just talk with your therapist about it, as Bob was saying. But trying to find people online, I would, if you're looking, and it's fine, I would look at other people talking about transference and just look for similarities, because I'm guessing other people because I see people on Reddit talking about transference in both irresponsible and responsible ways. So if you find the responsible ways people are talking about it, I'm guessing you share a lot, if not everything, in common with those kind of transferences. Another way to think about it is that if people are having transference regarding their parents, well, every parent is different. So you could just think of your parent figure transference is, in your mind, much more associated with God. And, there are philosophers going back centuries that would say that all God is a transference of our parents, that we learn when we're 20 or 30 that our parents are humans. When we were children, we didn't frame it in this language of they're a God, but we certainly saw them as gods. They could do anything. They knew everything. They had total power over our lives, dictated everything. And once we figure out our parents are just regular humans, there's this void in us that we need to fill, and we fill it with this God figure that has all the markers of a parent. If it's a male, then it's this older man who is wise and good, but can be smiteful, can be angry if you step out of line. I mean, it's just a parent, So you could think of all the other transference discussions online as just using a different word for a very similar thing. But I don't know, maybe your transference has a whole other layer, which could be. And I'm quite sure that other cult survivors who absorbed the God charismatic figure in the way that you did, which I imagine a lot of people did, will have this sort of transference, and there just aren't enough people talking about it online, is my assumption. I tend to think this way. This is sort of a side note to you, Jules, that whenever I have an experience that I am wondering if I'm normal or not, or about what other people are experiencing, I'm just looking for some answers. I always assume that there are people talking about my experience online, and often that is the case. I mean, sometimes I'll type in something to Google or something of a question like, did Sharon, this morning I was listening to an old podcast from 2009 in which they were talking about how Sharon Stone was talking to the press or something and saying that she was giving advice to a lot of young women. And by the way, this is horrible advice on its face. It's obvious, but she was saying that a lot of young women were coming up to her and asking her what they should do when men are pressuring the women for sex. And so her advice was, hey, if men are pressuring you for sex, just go down on them because, that'll get them off your back. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. Just
It is horrible.
Yeah. I'm not wording it the way that she did, but it was even worse than I'm wording it, actually. And now, she is not the inventor of this misogynistic rape culture notion. She is perhaps a victim of it and is expressing that surrender that she had to do a long time ago. But anyway, when I was typing because I was listening to this podcast from 2009, and I'm like, is that true that Sharon Stone said that? And so I type in to Google, and it filled in the rest of the question because other people were asking the same question, even going back 16 years. So I just figured I could ask a question of Google and instantly get an answer, and I did. Or if you're having some sort of therapy experience, a lot of times you go to Reddit. There's various different forums, and a lot of people will absolutely share your experience and validate you. You might post something or read another post. But there are still a lot of things that are not being discussed, or it's really hard to find those discussions online. So just because you can't find it online does not mean that people aren't having it. We have yet to get to a point where all of human experience, even the lesser known ones, are represented in the online discourse. So that's my answer to that. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.